In this video, you're going to learn about the Mars retrograde cycle for 2020 and how it's going to unfold over time. If you're an aspiring astrologer, this is for you. We're going to be looking at a brief look at retrogrades in general, and then we're going to have a much closer look at the actual full Mars retrograde cycle. The aim of this video is to help you improve your forecasting techniques for your clients so that you fully understand how the Mars retrograde period is working, what are the important dates, and who it's going to affect most. If you have Mars retrograde in your chart, write the sign below. We'd love to see. Welcome, stars. This year, 2020, Mars is going to be retrograde and it will be fully contained in the sign of Aries. This is interesting in itself because it's Mars's own sign, so the energies of this planet will be on full force for everybody. So we are going to be looking at a brief look at retrogrades in general. We're going to have a closer look at the actual dates and positions in the zodiac about when Mars will make its stations and how the retrograde cycle will unfold. Then we're going to be looking at some of the major aspects that Mars is going to make whilst it's retrograde in Aries this year. We're not looking at every single one. We're only going to be looking at the main aspects that Mars is going to make. And then we're going to consider as how this particular Mars retrograde cycle is going to affect each sign one by one. So that's a little bit further on, and where I get to the Aries, Taurus, Gemini, the best way for you to interpret these is to take your ascendant sign, and that will make way more sense about how this particular Mars retrograde period is going to affect you. So let's get started. So let's have a closer look at the Mars retrograde cycle. And when Mars is retrograde, it's symbolized with the R with the X. So the Mars retrograde cycle typically occurs once every 2 years. So Mars will not necessarily be retrograde every single year, and it wasn't retrograde in 2019. It will be retrograde in 2020, and it will not be retrograde in 2021. The Mars retrograde cycle in time will cover a period of between 56 to 82 days long, and it really averages around 9 weeks for each retrograde cycle. Each one is different, just depending on the speed and position of the Earth, the Sun, and Mars at the time Mars goes retrograde. So the Mars retrograde cycle in longitude, this is a diagram where you can see the inner circle is the Sun, and then the green circle will be Mercury with its retrograde periods. The pink one is Venus with its retrograde periods, and then we have the red circle coming around there, and that is showing Mars in its retrograde period there on the thicker line, and it covers an area of about 13 degrees of the zodiac for each retrograde period. And we can see quite clearly the positions of the other retrograde planets in this diagram, but we're only concentrating on Mars here now. So the Mars retrograde cycle position shifts each time because Mars is not always retrograde in the same place, and each sequential zodiac sign pattern, it will move forward about 40 degrees each time there's a new retrograde period. So sometimes it's just in the next sign, and at other times it will skip a whole sign and just move on to the next sign. So let's have a closer look now at the Mars 2020 retrograde cycle. And the dates for this are from September the 9th to November the 14th, 2020, Mars will be retrograde. It's actually going to be retrograding in the sign of Aries, and the whole of the retrograde period is contained in the one sign of Aries, which is really a powerful position for Mars because Mars rules Aries. So it's not crossing across sign boundaries for this retrograde period. And the actual Mars 2020 Aries transit is very long indeed, and Mars will actually be in the sign of Aries for over 192 days, which is just over 6 months of the total year. So Mars is consistently in Aries during 2020 because it's doing the retrograde there. So the Mars 2020 retrograde degrees are, Mars will be retrograding from Aries 28 degrees to Aries 15 degrees. It goes backwards, that's your 13 degrees I was talking about a moment ago. So Mars will enter the pre-shadow on July the 26th, 2020, which is not long off now. So what this means is that Mars is moving along in Aries and it's going to cross into the pre-shadow area of the retrograde period. If you need further explanation on this diagram, you can check out my other video, the 5 parts to a retrograde cycle, to see exactly what we're looking at here. Anyhow, Mars comes along on the green line. It enters the pre-shadow on the white line, and then it moves along. Mars will then be stationing retrograde on September the 9th at 28 degrees 08 Aries, and it will be 9 days at the station. So for a planet to be considered in station, it has to be within 0 degrees and 10 minutes of the station, and that's why at this time Mars will linger for 9 whole days at 28 degrees Aries. This particular Mars station retrograde will specifically affect anyone whose birthdays are on April 17th, 18th or 19th of any year. You will seriously be affected by this station. And anyone who has planets or points in their natal chart at 28 degrees 08 Aries or within 1 degree of that. So if you've got any planets or points in your chart at 27, 28 or 29 Aries, you're going to be affected by this station retrograde on September the 9th. Then Mars will do its retrograde period. It will then station direct on November the 14th, and this will be at 15 degrees 14 Aries. And Mars will linger for 7 days at this station. So it once again will be hanging about at that degree, 15 degrees 14 Aries, for quite a long time. And this will specifically affect anyone who has a birthday on April the 4th, 5th or 6th of any year. And it will affect anyone with planets or points at 15 degrees 14 Aries. So if you have any details in your chart around 14, 15 or 16 Aries, this Mars station on November the 14th will affect you more. Mars will then finally clear the after shadow on January the 4th, 2021. And it's at that point there, as it's moving out of the after shadow, picking up full speed now and trotting along, continuing on its journey. So that will be when it clears the after shadow. Let's have a look at some of Mars's aspects that it's going to make whilst it's retrograde in 2020. I'm only looking at the main aspects that are occurring here, although there are other aspects as well. So Mars is going to square Jupiter during this time. It will square Pluto. It will conjoin Eris. It will square Saturn, and it will oppose the Sun. And these will happen at different times. We're going to have a closer look at those now. So if we consider the graphic ephemeris, that is actually a visual representation of Mars's aspects when retrograde, we can take a closer look at this. And what I have here is a diagram of the Mars position as it going retrograde. This is the position of Aries from 0 to 30 degrees. That's Aries in the zodiac. And the retrograde period for Mars will be on that red line from the bottom of the dip to the top of the crest of the wave almost. That will be Mars's retrograde period, going from somewhere in September to somewhere in November. And that's actually when Mars is going to be retrograde during 2020. So we're just going to have a bit of a closer look at that. The diagram is helpful visually to see how Mars is going to make connections to the planets. So first up, we're going to have Mars squaring Jupiter, and it will start on August the 3rd when Mars is direct, and this will be happening at 19 Aries. Mars will then swoop back on its retrograde path on October the 19th, again to make a square to Jupiter, and it will then make the final direct pass on January 22nd, 2021, that's next year, at 7 Taurus. So it's making 3 hits as it squares Jupiter 3 times. So as we consider the graphic ephemeris, we can see the 3 hits there, the one in August, the one in October, and then finally the one in January. And these are the Mars squaring Jupiter timeframes. As Mars squares Jupiter at these points, we can give some, I have a suggested interpretation there, where actively reassess your current growth trajectory and life path. This is an interpretation for Mars squares Jupiter, and it is transiting, so it will affect everybody, and that would be a suggested interpretation for that aspect. Mars then moves on to square Pluto, and it will make the first direct pass on August the 13th at 23 Aries. It will make its second retrograde square on October the 8th at 22 Aries, and finally its third and direct pass on December the 22nd at 23 Aries. So you can see Pluto is virtually hardly moved from August to December. It's hanging about at 22, 23 all the time. And we can see that again now on the graphic ephemeris, where Mars squares Aries. It's happening there mid-August time, kind of early October, and then later on in December. And because Pluto's line is pretty flat, you can see that it's remaining at the 22 to 23 degrees Aries position on the graphic ephemeris. So those are your three hits that Mars is going to make to Pluto. When Mars does square Pluto, a suggested interpretation would be that you'd be energized to dig deep and expose your hidden challenges in life. You have to realize this is happening for everybody. It is a transiting square. Next, we're going to look at Mars conjoining Eris. Eris, that's the symbol there, Mars conjoined Eris. Eris is the symbol for Mars pointing downwards, where Mars is an erect arrow pointing upwards, which is very masculine. Eris, being the female warrior, has the arrow pointing downwards, or dare I say, flaccid. So these dates are: the direct conjunction will be on August the 17th at 24 Aries. The retrograde will occur then on October the 4th at 24 Aries, and the final direct pass will be on December the 22nd at 23 Aries. Now, of course, Aries is a planet that is virtually hardly moving anyway, and it's lingering around, again, 23, 24 degrees Aries and virtually not moving all year, but Mars comes along and makes the conjunction. So mythically, Aries is Mars' sister anyway, so this is a total combination of masculine, feminine, I don't want to say aggressive energy, but active energy. So when we look at the graphic ephemeris regarding Mars conjoining Aries, we see it right there. 1, 2, 3, there's your three hits. So we've got mid-August, early October, and again somewhere towards the end of December. And that's when Mars is going to conjoin Aries at this retrograde period. It's going to make three hits there to Aries. And when it does, a suggested interpretation for those three periods would be to review your attitude towards gender expectations and sexual expression. And you would want to do those on the 3 days that Mars is conjoining Aries. Again, it's happening for everyone. It is a transiting conjunction. Then Mars is going to be squaring Saturn. The first direct pass will be on August 25th at 26 Aries. Next, the retrograde pass will be at September 29th at 25 Aries, and again on January the 12th, 2021 at 3 Taurus. So the first two are close together because Saturn's hanging about at 25, 26 Aries, and then finally Saturn starts moving off, and it's actually at 3 degrees Taurus by the time the third and final square occurs for Mars. Now we can see this quite clearly again on the graphic ephemeris. There's your first Mars square Saturn, your second, they're quite close together, and then finally the third one, Saturn has made quite a bit of movement by the time we get to the third exact square. A suggested interpretation for when Mars is squaring Saturn on those 3 days would be for you to actively review and revise your strategy surrounding the achievement of your goals in life. So this is what we're doing. We're actively looking at our goals. The next aspect we're going to look at is Mars opposite the Sun, and that will occur on October the 14th at 21 Aries. This is just happening once, and a suggested interpretation for that will be perhaps frustrations with other people. It's going to happen for absolutely everybody as well. Okay, so the Mars 2020 retrograde period, what to expect? Who will this affect most? It will energize anyone who's got birthdays from April the 5th to the 18th. It will bring up challenges from other people for anyone with birthdays from October the 9th to the 22nd. It will bring additional tension for anyone whose birthday is from January the 6th to the 18th, and anyone who's got their birthday from July the 7th to the 21st. Let's just see how the Mars retrograde for 2020 will affect Aries. First up, you can rejuvenate your body, replenish your independent soul, and revive and energize any flagging spirits. For Taurus, you can revisit your private diary, redo affirmations and gratitudes, and repair your soul with prayer and meditation. For Gemini, reach out to old friends, reconnect with associates, rejoice in finding your tribe. Cancer, reminisce on your glory days, compete and reclaim past victories, refresh your skills towards your career goals. For Leo, revisit your favourite places, reread books and rewatch movies, reinstate any lost philosophies on life. For Virgo, revisit past irritations, reveal secret assignations, and recommit to your supporters. For Libra, recommit to finding balance in life, revisit issues in personal relationships, and re-challenge others to make war for peace. Scorpio, reveal dissatisfaction in life, reinvigorate any private affairs, and reflect on the self through examination. Sagittarius, recalibrate your appetite for risk, reassess your relationships with children, recapture enjoyment in fun, creative activities. How Mars Retrograde 2020 will affect Capricorn. Make repairs at home. Find renewed energy for family and reassess the foundations of your life. For Aquarius, rejuvenate the urge to learn. Revisit your sibling relationships. Review all information, gossip, and reveal lies. For Pisces, reveal your true self-worth. Return unwanted purchases. Reassess your personal values. Okay, so there's a lot to think about there. This Mars retrograde for 2020 is going to be quite big, I think. I just want to share a quick story with you. Way back in 2012, there was a Mars retrograde cycle that occurred in Virgo. Now, in my natal chart, I have Mars in Virgo, and what actually happened was that transiting Mars hit my Mars 3 times, and that meant that I had a triple Mars return, and that was the year back then in 2012. It was the time when I got off the couch and got organized with this website. I started to learn about how WordPress worked. I launched my website, Starzology.com, launched the blog, and I started generating and producing, as a Virgo would, all the information and blog posts and all the rest of it. I started my mailing list, and I slowly started to build up my absolute website where I was more structured and organized. And it was during this Mars retrograde 3-hit Mars return that I actually did something about it. I'd had so much information beforehand. We'd recently come to Canada, and the kids were a little bit bigger by then, and suddenly I had this time on my hands, and this is when I started to focus in and take action to put things into place. It's not that I had to go out and learn new stuff. I knew all the stuff. It was just a matter of learning the technology, learning how the internet worked, and getting my stuff out there, starting to produce and be productive, which in practical ways, which is very much what Mars in Virgo means anyway. So in my chart in general, Mars in Virgo is a pretty low-key planet for me. It's not in my face. It's not yelling at me every day from my chart. I've got a lot more dominant planets in different signs that come through, such as the Leo and the Scorpio, they are there, and I'm grappling with that all the time. But little old Mars in Virgo was pretty much a quiet type of Mars until this Mars retrograde came on through and stimulated the whole thing, and that was the beginning of it all. So the point being that if you do have planets in Aries or points in your chart in Aries on these degrees, they are going to be energized now through this Mars retrograde period. So there we have it. I'm Alison Price. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.